David, welcome to the Schiller and Hamilton Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in today, man. Happy Friday, by the way.
Yeah. It's great weather.
Beautiful day out there. It's finally springtime.
Yeah. Trees are blooming, cherries.
So you're here with regards to your role with the Fort Mill Economic Partners. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself before we get into that, though? What's your professional, what do you do during the day other than the Fort Mill Economic Partners?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Mm-hmm.
So my day job is I'm a general contractor at Buist. We started about 10 years ago. We've also gotten to real estate development over the years. We like to develop daycares and office buildings. We have an office here in Fort Mill, and then we also in the Charlotte area. In the Charleston area.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, been exciting times. But the Fort Mill Economic Partners grew out of a organization that the town of Fort Mill started called Move Fort Mill Forward,
mm-hmm.
and that became the Fort Mill Economic Council, and then eventually became the Fort Mill Economic Partners.
The background, just start from the beginning tell me the history of how Fort Mill Economic Partners actually began.
Right. So the Fort Mill Economic Partners grew out of the organization that the town of Fort Mill started called Move Fort Mill Forward, and then that morphed into the Fort Mill Economic Council, and then became the Fort Mill Economic Partners. Primarily, the mission is to help the town of Fort Mill attract, retain, and help the business community and economic growth in general for the town.
Was that the original mission as well when it was first formed?
It was, yep.
So what's the timeline? When was that actually formed?
It predated me, but I want to say it was at least 15 years ago. So
Okay.
It's been around for quite a bit.
Yeah, and
the first meetings were down in the old red caboose next to the railroad tracks was their home base.
That's an awesome place to meet.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. And the timing was impeccable because that's really when the Fort Mill boom sort of began. Because not long before that, Fort Mill was still kind of a smaller town. But somehow it's managed to retain that character, I think, even with all the growth. But so what's your role with it's now known as the Fort Mill Economic Partners. Tell me about your role within the group.
So I was elected chairman about this time last year. We've got a pretty strong board of local business owners and various agencies, school districts, et cetera. We have had some pretty good times these last couple of years, but we've also got a lot of things that still need to be worked on in Fort Mill. And we're pretty proud of what we've done, but we've also got a lot more to do.
Yeah, so tell me, coming into the chairmanship position, how you see the role of Fort Mill Economic Partners within the greater community. So you mentioned, growing and helping and supporting businesses and retail. Has that changed over time? Is that still the same role? And how do you go about doing that?
Sure. Well, some of the things that we've accomplished is the Bailey Bill was adopted by the town of Fort Mill, which is an excellent tool for somebody who wants to come in and develop an old building. We also helped with the facade grant improvements for downtown Fort Mill. And one of the things I'm real proud of, because it was one of the first things that I really helped with the partners, was helping with the Wayfinder study that was conducted on behalf of the town of Fort Mill to try to improve traffic flow and notification signs going from, all the way from the interstate down to the pedestrian level. And that plan has been adopted by the town of Fort Mill, and we're looking for those signs to start rolling out as soon as this year. So amazing accomplishment to try to help with some of the growth symptoms that are wonderful, but with that growth we have traffic, and Wayfinder system is a great tool to try to help manage that growth.
That's the Wayfinder system, I think, is a great example of this, because everyone knows about the people moving to Fort Mill, but they may not understand the extent to which people come and visit Fort Mill. Fort Mill has the two top tourist destinations in the county. Carowinds and now Kingsley is right behind it, which again impacts the traffic. How does the Wayfinder system actually help mitigate some of that, or what do you think the function of that is going to be?
Sure. So the biggest problem that a Wayfinder system tries to address is when you're trying to get the most efficient trip out of each driver, and the only way you could do that is to give them the knowledge that they need to know where they're going. The average trip in Charlotte was shortened by 15 minutes per trip when they put their Wayfinder system in. And you multiply that by as many cars are on the road, and you can see the benefit of something like that.
Yeah.
So the idea here is that we don't want people driving around for 15 minutes trying to figure out where to park. We don't want them to try to figure out a quicker way to get somewhere. We want it to be obvious, and we want them to go through the major corridors and not through local arterial roads where they're putting burdens on a community road. So those are all accomplished with a good and sound Wayfinder system.
So I don't know if you could tell, but when you mentioned that it saved the average trip 15 minutes, it kind of blew my mind because the cost to benefit ratio there is just through the roof. And I want to put that in context because, for instance, one of the projects in the near future in Fort Mill is the widening of 21, which is probably way past due. That project will cost tens of millions of dollars, and it will probably save less than a minute of average travel time. And you're talking about, a study and the placement of where to put them, and the cost to put in and install these signs is probably what? I mean, do you have an idea what the dollar figure is for the Wayfinder project?
And I'm going from memory here because we did have it in phases. I want to say the first phase was somewhere between the $50,000 and $100,000 range. And it's a pretty significant investment, and I think that they're going to do the most important ones first and get down to the pedestrian level on phase 2. But that's where you're going to see the biggest bang for the buck.
But you're talking about spending less than $1 million to save an average of 15 minutes of travel time for people coming in the area, which means less cars on the road that residents are competing with if the travel times and the trips are shorter. So you're talking about a very low cost and just a huge benefit. And when you're talking in the context of infrastructure improvements, I don't know how you get a better cost-benefit ratio than that. That's incredible.
Yeah, and I really want to compliment the town on having the vision of saying, this is an issue. We have some fantastic growth in the town limits, but we also have the symptoms of that wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And how do we mitigate it for our residents? And I really appreciate their partnership with us to move that forward. It's going to help a lot.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that growth before we get too much into anything else because we've mentioned it a couple times. We have this 2020 census results that we're expecting this year, which are, I know everyone is on pins and needles waiting to see what those numbers are. But anecdotally, let's start here. How long have you been in Fort Mill?
10 years.
10 years. Yep. So you've seen a huge change just in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Especially with certain corridors like 160. I mean, 10 years ago, there was still goat farms on 160, which are now residents or neighborhoods with 800 homes or more, all of which are, putting all those cars and people, all that demand onto 160. And perhaps for anyone listening from outside the Fort Mill area or your kind that isn't aware, there aren't too many roads in Fort Mill. Like there's only a few ways to get places, right? And so you're kind of bottlenecked on those roads. And that traffic sort of becomes a pain for people when they're trying to get up and down or get somewhere. But you're kind of referencing or discussing it kind of in terms of being a blessing to have, because what that means is you have people that want to be and live in your area, right? That's a good thing. Am I correct? I don't want to.
You're one of the leading indicators of a successful, thriving community is a increase in traffic. It indicates that people want to be here. Mm-hmm. People are happy to live here. And what's happening to me is that we're seeing the traffic coming from both directions. It's not just a commute out of Fort Mill going to work somewhere else. We actually have a business community that's thriving now, and that people are actually commuting into Fort Mill and using our resources here, mm-hmm. and eating in our restaurants and visiting our shops, and that helps us support our community.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the economic partners. One of their roles is to support local businesses. Do you find that the kind of support, or when people approach you, are their questions generally along the lines of dealing with success or dealing with growth, dealing with those types of challenges? Or is it normally, how do I tap into this influx of new people? What kind of challenges or conversations are the economic partners having?
So Fort Mill is very desirable, and I think that most people want to see their business move here for quality of life reasons, for the fantastic community that's being built around here. And one of the first things we did last year was to say, okay, let's put all the tools that someone who wants to locate their business in Fort Mill in one place. So we have a fantastic resource that I encourage everybody to go check out on our website. We've got a Catalyst plugin that you can go see property that's available for lease or for purchase that's listed, real-time updated, nothing's out of date. We also have the full process of how you need to apply for a business license, where you have to go to get plans submitted. All of that information's in one place, one-stop shop, and even all the way down to incentives, which I'm not an expert on, but it's there. There's some great tabs there, abandoned building credits, things like that you can certainly pursue if you want to relocate your business to Fort Mill. It's a great success story, and if you want to move your business here, there's the opportunity to see what step one is.
So that kind of begs the question, though, and I know the answer to this, but I want to kind of put you on the spot and hear the pitch. Why would someone want to move their business to Fort Mill?
That's a great question. I think that it starts with two major things that makes Fort Mill such a wonderful place to live. We have a fantastic school district here. The quality of education that you get in Fort Mill is not a second seat to anybody. My kids are here. I'm a huge fan. The second thing is that we have one of the most amazing natural resources in South Carolina, the Enclosed Greenway. It's a fantastic trail system. I'm there almost every week, walking the trails, hiking, learning how to ride horses, fishing, getting outdoors and being connected to your community, and having respite. Times like COVID in the past year we've had has been an amazing resource. Even the dog park that's been added is just pretty amazing. So between those two things, and of course we're bordered by the Catawba River, which is another great natural resource, which the mayor has worked out a fairly good program with one of the local developers to bring access to the river from the town limits, and I commend her for doing that. I think that's just another opportunity for town of Fort Mill to enjoy the world around us and plug into nature.
So you have a demographic of people who appreciate the value proposition of quality of life, quality education, access to resources, access to Charlotte, major market, although Fort Mill, as we'll talk about, is a market in its own right now. And so businesses see that demographic, those people coming into the area, they see the growth, and they want to be a part of it, right?
Yeah, one of the we had the vice president of LPL come speak to our group about 2 years ago, and he freely offered that this was the first building headquarters that they picked, which got kind of mind-blowing when you think of how many different places they are around the world, in places like San Diego, et cetera. And Fort Mill, they picked it. And we asked, why did you pick it? And he said, 100% it's the quality of life.
Wow.
We're able to give our employees more here than anywhere else.
And that's a healthy balance, right? It's a balance of the things that you mentioned, weather, bang for the buck, what you can buy, how far a dollar goes. And Fort Mill is competitive with anywhere else in the country, I think, for all those things. Yeah,
you see us attracting multiple Fortune 500 companies to what was a small town, and it really makes you, it fulfills that dream that I think Fort Mill has of being a leader, and not just being a residential community, but protecting our natural resources, but also attracting the best kind of economic growth for our community.
Speaking of, residential community, when this wave of growth initially happened, I think there was, and there might have been some accuracy to it, but the perception was that a lot of the growth was, people moving to be close to Charlotte, that worked in Charlotte, and those people kind of thought of themselves as being in the Charlotte market. That initial wave of growth, a lot of them were commuters, but when they went out to eat, they went out to eat in Charlotte. When they hired an accountant, they went to Charlotte. What's your take on that perception? Was that accurate? Is that still accurate? How has that changed?
Yeah, in my 10 years here, I think that there was a period of time where, people thought first and foremost, if I'm going to go out for a really nice meal, or if I need to hire a really good accountant, or if I need to get something with business done, I need to drive north and cross a state border to go get those services. I don't think that's true anymore. I think that we have a very vibrant restaurant community where you have tons of choices and options, and they're first class. I think that we also, the next wave for Fort Mill I really see is professional services for our residents. I think that Fort Mill deserves those things. I think that the demographics are there, and people can appreciate the fact that they can be served in their own community and not have to go to Charlotte anymore. And developers are catching up to that fact. They're saying, you know what, we do need a new hospital, and sure enough, the hospital finally did break ground in Fort Mill. We have medical services that are growing up and maturing here that you no longer need to leave the town of Fort Mill to go get those services. And the professional community is also catching up, and we've taking notice of the great growth that we've had here, and the reason why we've been able to attract so many residents that are interested in that quality of life. So that's exciting stuff.
It just occurred to me. Do you think that perhaps the last year and some of the consequences of COVID, or one of the consequences of COVID being that more people were working from home, so you also had a large number of people perhaps in Fort Mill that had previously been commuting to the big towers in Charlotte that are now staying in Fort Mill during the day and going to eat for lunch in Fort Mill during the day, or picking up their clothes from the dry cleaner in Fort Mill, or, demanding those professional services. Do you think that might have accelerated that process?
That's a really good point. I definitely feel that the inner cities are a tougher sell right now, because people realize that when it comes down to it, if I'm confined to my living unit, and that doesn't include any outdoor tie-ins, that's a really tough proposition, especially for somebody who's younger and wants to get out and exercise and those kinds of things, and see what the best of life outdoors has to offer. Fort Mill has all that. The Greenway is just a great resource. And it's served throughout the pandemic. They had fantastic membership growth, and gave a way for people to go enjoy those things safely, but at the same time get out of their house and really appreciate what's out there.
Where do you see, you said you moved here 10 years ago. Where do you see the next 10 years? I think kind of famously, Fort Mill is somewhat hemmed in, just by nature of its geography between the state line and the river. So there's not a whole lot of room to expand with land. Fort Mill can't grow out. Is there room for more development? Is there room for infill? Is there room for more density? What do you think the next 10 years look like for growth in Fort Mill? And where is that growth going to come from?
Sure. There are some areas that Fort Mill has designated for growth and for economic development. And I'm thinking primarily about the Fort Mill Bypass, which is a brand new road and really has the opportunity to bring access to good commercial land. And then talking about our historic downtown, which still has several opportunities for people who want to take on a project that has, that walkable life of Fort Mill. So that's another area that I think is ripe for continued development and some density, because quite frankly, that's the area where you want to see densities in your core, where people are putting their car in the garage and they're walking. They're walking to work, walking to restaurants, walking to entertainment. And I'm happy to say that the historical downtown Fort Mill has continued to grow. And if I can plug our own here, we're kicking off revising the priority investment district, which is primarily the historical area of Fort Mill. The Fort Mill Economic Partners are studying that. We did so about 5 years ago, and a lot of the things that came out of that study helped the downtown Fort Mill grow as we know it today. The reinvestment that's happened. So we're restarting that process and going to look for what's next for the next 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're kind of referencing maybe 10, 15 years ago. If you went downtown Fort Mill, there was a lot of empty buildings.
A lot of plywood.
A lot of boarded windows, plywood on those windows. And there were a lot of buildings in need of some tender love and care, some beautiful old historic buildings that were criminally neglected. Yeah. And other than just the growth, I mean, has there been a mindset shift? What do you think When you mentioned the grants, tell me about the impetus for the changes and the wave of redevelopment downtown.
The town of Fort Mill doesn't really love the idea of putting a whole lot of density in multifamily, et cetera. But one area where they would support it, at least I believe they would support it, and they have had it recently, is in the downtown corridor. And what's great about that is when you bring density to your core, you reinvigorate the business community around there to serve those residents. And here's the other thing: it's not usually vehicular traffic because they're parked there and they're living there.
Yeah.
So you really are serving the best of a community when you do things like that.
Yeah. We kind of skipped right into like the big macro stuff just because that's what I think is fun to talk about. But I know Fort Mill Economic Partners also has a lot of cool stuff coming up this year, like projects that they're working on. Last year was perhaps a lost year for a lot of people. What are the goals for 2021 and what's on the immediate horizon?
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about it. We've got 3 things that I think are pretty amazing. The first one is we're partnering with the town with the Strawberry Festival. We're the host of the Sprint and Stroll kickoff event for the Strawberry Festival this year. It's a 5K, family friendly. Please come on out. It'll be socially distanced and released in waves, so you can stay safe, but you can also get outside and enjoy the area. And it's in downtown, which a lot of races don't happen there, and it's kind of fun to see those communities. And by the way, after the race is over, go enjoy downtown Fort Mill. Have that lunch and enjoy yourself. It's a great kickoff for that event, so we're really happy about that one. The second, we just mentioned it briefly, but the Priority Investment District refresh that we're doing for downtown, we're doing that with the town support, and we're looking for trying to find ways that we can reinvest and re-envision how the historic district of Fort Mill can grow again. Really excited about that. And then the third thing we're doing is we're working with Winthrop University to help sponsor some classes coming in the fall. We want to do a feasibility study to see if the thread trail can be extended and connect to downtown Fort Mill. Again, we're just real strong advocates for using the resources that we have and using them smart and in a way that helps the community grow. And the towns has some interest, the Greenway has some interest, and we hope the thread trail will be too, for bringing that connectivity to downtown Fort Mill. In my head, I'm thinking the Swamp Rabbit Trail in Greenville as an example of one of these fantastic partnerships that have come out of that, and what a great resource that's become. So, and
that gets to the quality of life that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
and it's almost like a community can only get so good, right? How do you just keep adding more to it?
Yeah, right.
But you just mentioned using the resources available to you, and I think maybe you were referencing the natural resources, but you are talking about the partnership with Winthrop. And Winthrop is an amazing resource that has, been available. How did that partnership come together?
So Winthrop's on our board. They are a higher learning education that, again, takes a backseat to no one. We're blessed to have them in our community. They really have a really good economic department. They've helped the town from time to time looking at impact fees, looking at traffic impact analysis during COVID, whether that has to be relooked at, and they were successful in helping the town look at that. They're a great university, and we're really so glad to have them on the board with us, because they've come up with a lot of great ideas to help study things when the town asks for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And presumably there's some value for the students there as well to get to work on these real world problems, right?
Yeah. So if we can, we're looking forward to it, and it's not set in stone yet, but we're working with a couple of professors, and we're hoping to have 2 economics classes starting next fall, studying the feasibility of connecting a thread trail in Fort Mill. And I just want to, again, commend Winthrop for stepping up to the plate again and putting their community first. And what a great partnership.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool partnership to see. Anytime that I see Winthrop engaged in the community with any type of value-added project like that, it just kind of proves a thesis in my own mind that's just such it's a bank of just intellectual horsepower that just is rarely tapped into, or not tapped into nearly as much as I think as it should be. So I think it's pretty cool to see the Fort Mill Economic Partners in the town engage it in the way that they are. just because there's so much value to be added there. Well, how do people find the Fort Mill Economic Partners? So if I'm a business that's thinking about locating to Fort Mill and I want to talk to you or I want to talk to someone else within the organization, how do we reach out? How do people come learn more?
Our website's a great resource. Start there. We've got all kinds of contact information. We also have a monthly meeting. If you'd like to come and be a guest to a meeting, we'd love to have you. We are still virtual, so it's a fairly easy process if you want to be on the agenda. That's also an opportunity to send Leanne, our director, an email, and her contact information is on the website. And let us know what that you'd like to come and talk to our board about. We've had a bunch of speakers come. We had a fantastic program about the vaccine rollout a couple months back that was fascinating on Atrium's work on seeing that through. So absolutely, if you'd like to be more involved, we'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, David, I mean, we could talk all day about this stuff, but is there anything else that you want to make sure people know about or get out there about the Economic Partners?
No, I'm glad to be with you today, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.